Hey, what's up? Liron here. Thank you for joining me. We seem to be live, so just let me know you can hear me well, and we'll get started right at it. I'm going to start reading some of the messages here. I'm going to try to read at least a few messages at the start of every live just to get things going, get people in the room. Thank you so much. We have 14 people in the house. So we have John. Hi, Liron. I hope you are well and feeling much better today. Thank you so much. It took a while. I was weak for a few days, even after recovering for the most part, and yeah, it was very rough, but today I'm fine. It's the first day I finally worked out properly, had a lot more energy, so thank you so much for worrying. Much better. Dave says, hi Liron, I echo John's watercolor's words, hope you are well, my friend. Thank you so much. Waiting patiently for my favorite time of the week. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Jeff Francisco, hi, how are you? Thank you for the kind words. Of course I am. Hey, hope you're feeling better this week. Thank you so much. Celia, infused in water. Loud and clear. Thank you. I know the video quality is still not the best. It's something that I will improve in the future. Sorry about that. Hopefully it doesn't hurt the viewing experience too much. Now I want to use this opportunity, if you can, and if you enjoy these live streams, to just leave a like. That really helps more people find the stream, even people that aren't subscribed to the channel. It's actually very interesting. Quite a lot of people find the channel that way, so thank you so much for that. Celia says, hi from France. Crispy says, gute Tag from Germany. Probably mispronouncing stuff, but thank you so much for that. Thank you to anyone who's here. Let me know where you're from. Zaid Thakur, topic right up my alley. Amazing, happy to hear. Donna Bowman, good morning. Glad you're feeling better. Thank you so much. Today we're going to have a fun live stream. I have a couple of things for you. I think it's going to be a very good teaching tool. I have something interesting. We're going to talk about light and shadow, as the title suggests. Different light and shadow conditions and what we can learn from them. I want to get a few more people in that way we can get started. Hopefully people won't miss out too much of the beginning. Zaid says calisthenics or weightlifting, just weightlifting, trying for it to be as functional as I can, like deadlifts and stuff like that, things that work the entire body. Bent over rows, Russian twist, nightmare, I do way too many repetitions of that. Henny Shea says, lovely recent valley painting, Liron, one of my faves. Thank you so much. Zaid Takur, are you feeling good? Thank you, my friend, much better. But yeah, I haven't updated a lot recently, and it's just because of that. Had to lay low a bit, rest, recover, and I'm going to try and pay more attention to that in the future. Make sure that I'm allowing myself enough time to recover, especially after bursts of working a little harder than usual. GL Amor says, Liron, what's up, bro? God bless you today, watching in Texas. Thank you so much, GL. Laura Merrifield, good morning from California. Laura, by the way, I saw the email. I saw that you found the origin of the reference photo. I may do it in next week's, one of next week's videos. I'm still a little hesitant. Maybe I should reach out to the person and ask their permission to use the photo. Laura sent me a really nice photo that I have a really good idea for a video tutorial to show how I approach the reference in a way that you wouldn't have thought maybe is possible, and to paint it in a fun way. So thank you so much for that. And good morning from California, you say. Ange, hello from Maine, northeastern United States. Can't wait. I actually know where Maine is. Don't remember why, but it's a beautiful area. It's north of New York, right? Let me know. Love this area. Laura is in the house. Hey, can't stay, but wanted to say hi. Love your new simplification videos. Thank you so much, Laura. Now, a lot of the value of this live stream is actually probably going to be in the first 15 minutes or so. So you can visit it again once you can and just watch the first few minutes. I think you will learn a lot. Everyone here, I hope you will learn a lot from that, because I'm going to talk to you about an important principle when it comes to reference photos and light and shadow, something I haven't really mentioned in that way before. So and it's going to be like the first 15 minutes. So if you're short on time today, stay tuned for that. It's going to be really, I think, helpful, the beginning. Christine Bourgeois, good morning from Minnesota. Thank you, Christine. Good morning to you too. Zaid Thakur. By the way, Israel Adesanya or Jen Yan Blackowitz. I'm not sure what that means. Let me know, Zaid, what you refer to. Paint and Brush, subscribe. Me, Thai, poor Not sure what you mean by that too, but if you say you subscribe, thank you so much. James L. Baker, greetings all from London. Wet and cold here today. Aqualola Quintessent, hey yeah. Yourself, 456 Barrett. Hi Liron, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Thank you. I'm feeling much better today. Pence Palacio, hi Liron, thank you. Laura Merrifield, looking forward to it. Pence Palacio, you good now? Much better. Thank you so much for the kind words, everyone. Rosa Carvalho, hello from Brazil. Is it Carvalho or Carvalho? I'm not sure. Anne-Marie Lofberg, hello from Sweden. Marjorie Johnson, good morning. And GMA is north of New York. Anne-Marie Lofberg, this is gonna be interesting, I think you mean. Jan Lundgren, sorry, I'm always having a hard time pronouncing. Good morning from Canada. Zaid says, I thought you watch UFC. Oh, sorry, yeah, I don't watch UFC. Sorry, I barely watch any sports. I tried getting into soccer when I was a kid. There was a time there in 5th grade, but nothing after that, so sorry. Completely clueless in that regard. Tazim Halim, good evening from Bangladesh, Liron. Thank you, my friend. JZZY PHZZL. I'll not try pronouncing that. Greetings from Germany. Thank you so much. Billy Armstrong, good morning from California. GLOPRN 52, cheers, Mississippi. Okay, thank you so much. So everyone's in the house. We have 60 people on board. I'm going to go back later and address some of your questions. Let's get to the lesson. I want to show you some really interesting things. So today we're going to paint this scene of the Callanish stones from Scotland. A beautiful scene. I don't know much about the history, so feel free to share in the chat. But what I want to show you is how different light and shadow conditions can influence the same scene drastically. And this is actually the one we'll paint. I will crop some of the lower section. We don't need that much on the lower end. So we'll focus on the upper maybe 4/5. But I want to show you, again, the light and shadow conditions. So here's our scene. This is what we're going to paint. Here we have the sunlight coming from the left. It's still not that late, so the shadows are long, but they're not super long. Okay, now I want to show you something interesting. Let's take the same reference photo, just different angle, maybe a little earlier during the day. Again, shadows are, they're there. It's not like noon, the sun is not coming from right above, it's coming a little from the side, but it's kind of similar. But notice the difference between the two in that here we are facing towards some of the shadowy sides of the rocks, while here we're mostly facing the lit side of them, okay? Just because of the direction of the sun in the sky. Now let me show you something else. Here's what happens when the sun starts to set low. Okay, the shadows extend, and the light and notice the colors, especially the colors become more atmospheric in a way. They become a little bit stronger in the yellows, stronger in the blues. You get a stronger contrast of temperature. And again, I want you to compare this to that. This has very more natural colors, while this later hour begins to extend the shadows and create a bit more of an atmospheric feel. Now let's go more extreme. Maybe a little later during the day, I'm going to close all other photos, and I'm going to, after that, take a break and recap and make sure you understand everything. Here the sun sets really low, and what you get is much more extended shadows, more of a yellow glowy feeling to it, fewer colors. The grass isn't as green. The colors change. They're not as local anymore. It's not like the natural color in a natural light and shadow conditions. It's influenced by the time of day significantly and makes for a more moody kind of atmosphere, if you wish to call it that way. Another example, now this is really against the light. Here, in the previous one, the sun is kind of from the right side, but still front. And then here, it's really coming from behind the stone, so the shadows cast towards us. And notice the colors, again, golden kind of glow. The sky isn't really that blue, it's more of a very light kind of grayish blue and yellow, okay? Now look at that. This is overcast, so this is as close to, this is barely any light, it's just the clouds, and they filter the sunlight and distribute it evenly. What this leads to is more of those local colors. The grass is actually green. The stones, you can see they're gray a little more. They're not as glowy, not as yellow. Now let me go over to the chat and make sure that you understand so far, okay? And here are all reference photos together. So let me see that you're kind of tuned in and you understand what I'm talking about. 456 Barrett. By the way, I sent you a message from Instagram with account ZD, can you check it out when you're available? It was a watercolor painting for getting your opinions. Yes, definitely. I'm a little late on answering on all platforms, but I promise to go back and answer as much as I can. If this is the first message you sent me on Instagram, it's like a message request, I will definitely answer. If we've already had a thread going, send me an email, because it'll be hard for me to see it. Just saying if you want to make sure. But thank you so much, I will check it out. Dave Lowell, soccer is for people who don't paint. Soccer is for people who don't paint. Interesting, maybe. Maggie McNevin, and by the way, let me know it makes sense so far. Maggie McNevin, hi Liron, your global reach is amazing, love your videos. Thank you so much. Moon says hi from Philippines. System Feller says hello from Germany. Paint and Brush, make video about Winslow Homer and John Sargent. I have a few. Check them out, search for my name. Winslow Homer, I think I have one on Winslow Homer as well. On John Sargent, I of course have one. It's the most viewed Painting Masters episode. Marjorie Johnson, I hope you do a lot of mixing on paper today. Something I'm working on and not happy with. Okay, I will, because you said it. I didn't plan on specifically, but it'll be fun. Pence Palacio, also known as the Stonehenge of the North. Probably the Callanish stone. I love that word, Callanish. Probably mispronouncing it. Dave says, where did you get the references from? These are actually all from Pixabay, the website I use for all reference photos. I have a link in the description box to all of these reference photos, 1 to 6 numbered. Okay. Lady T, excellent, exactly what I needed to know for observation. Zaitakur, do you give feedback for personal works? I can on email, sometimes I do, sometimes I miss them, but send me an email, I'll try that. Marjorie Johnson, overcast, that's what I have here in Broome County, New York. We call it Gloomy County. Yeah, and it's a bit of a challenging subject when it's overcast. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. I'm going to talk about all the scenes and how I choose them. Megan King, yes, clear. Thank you so much. Maggie McNevin, personally, I like the warmth of number 3. Barrett says it was a request because we never messaged before. Cool, I'll check it out. I'll send it as an email just to make it easier for you. Yeah, of course. Actually, DMs are easy if it's the first one. Then it's hard to kind of keep the conversation going, just because I have tons of messages on Instagram. Yeah, email is more organized that way. Laura says, I've been working on city night light painting, and it's very strange mix of real and atmospheric colors. Strange and fun to paint. Yeah, night scenes you described it perfectly. A very strange mix of real and atmospheric colors. Jan Lundgren, especially very easy to understand. The reference photo really makes it simple to follow. Cool. So let me show you. Let's now look at these right here and go over them one by one, just again recap. So number 1 and 2 are kind of similar. It's just kind of middle of the day, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later. The colors are still quite natural, okay? There are plenty of very clear shapes there, which I like. The colors, again, they're natural. They may still be influenced a bit by the light and shadow. Of course, the light on the stones is a little more yellowy, golden, but just very slightly. It's still quite gray. Number 3, the sun sets a little bit. You have a bit more of a contrast between the warms and the cools. And this is really what I want you to notice. There's when you go from overcast, which is the extreme, all the way to perhaps the sunset later hours, what you get is stronger contrasts in the sunset times usually, and stronger contrast in temperature as well. So stronger contrast in values, lights are lighter, darks are darker, and stronger contrast of temperature, a bit more on the warmth and on the cool side of things. And what I like to do is, for the most part, avoid overcast scenes just because I find them challenging. If you look at number 6, it looks like all of the rocks and the ground are one shape while the sky is another. And you're definitely able to paint it. I find them challenging and less inspiring sometimes, so I personally don't paint these as much. You feel free to do whatever you want and whatever works for you. And you may find that you like overcast scenes. What I tend to go for is either like 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5, the more atmospheric. And it really will depend on my mood. If I want to do something that has a bit more color to it, I'll go with something like 1 and 2. If I want to go for something more atmospheric, where I can have more freedom, combine more shapes together, I'll go for 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's very simple. In this one, and hopefully I won't disappoint you, I will go for number 1 because I like the way it looks. Let's see if I have another note. Okay, yeah, and we'll just take it step by step. I will try to mix more on paper as requested to make things a little more interesting in that regard. One more thing I want to do that's going to be a little different in this process is we will start from the highlights, which is something I don't normally do. Usually I'll do a wash that covers everything, or I'll just, work in different sections of different colors. This time I want to work from light to dark, like in a more holistic way. So we'll actually start with the yellowy highlights, and then we'll put in the mid values, and then we'll put in the shadows. And this will help you with a few issues that a lot of people say they suffer from. So we'll get started. Okay, let me switch over to my desk camera here. We'll move these things aside, and we're gonna get started with the drawing stage. So let me move this for a moment so we can actually focus for a minute on the drawing like this. Or maybe let's do this because it's more comfortable this way. I'll move the reference photo to here, and hopefully you're able to see everything I do. Okay, let me see the chat for a moment, just make sure it all makes sense. So a lot of people joined. Thank you so much for joining, 66 concurrent viewers. I will try addressing some of your questions later on. I do see quite a few have popped. Okay, so we'll begin. Sorry, I didn't ask you in this particular live stream which one you want me to paint. I just made a decision in advance. We will do another one where I actually ask you, okay? So I'm going to get started with the horizon line, and I'm going to place it a little above the middle, kind of as I see it. Now, for the larger shapes, it's helpful to first put them in, disregarding the smaller shapes that obstruct them. I don't want to let all of these different stones distract me from getting one smooth line, okay? So I first put that in, going through where the stones are going to be. Now, because it's stones, it's a relatively easy shape for me to get. It's not people, it's not a complex perspective. I can just go ahead and start putting them in. Now, we have two main rocks, and they kind of reach to the middle of the sky, I would say, and a little tilted to the left. So the main rock that we see is somewhere around here. It has this kind of a structure. It goes like this, goes down, and kind of goes like that. And by the way, I'm looking now at the reference photo on my monitor, so I can't see what you're seeing. So if there are any issues, my apologies. I will fix them as soon as I kind of go back to seeing what's going on. But I have to really focus on the reference photo for this stage. So we have this rock, and then we have the shadow cast by it. Okay, it goes to the side here, kind of like this. And then we can get rid of the horizon line. It's going to be a very fast drawing. If you get bored by that, don't worry. We're going to finish it fast. And by the way, this was the first kind of 15 minutes I talked about that will be, I think, extra valuable. If you have to tune out or something like this, you got a lot of the value here. Obviously, you may want to see the painting stages and process. So if you're going to stick around, thank you for that. Another stone, maybe let's do it this way. Now, because I can see their shapes quite clearly, I don't have to worry too much about getting it accurate. I can make a lot of corrections specifically for this stage in the painting stage, kind of on the fly. If it were a more complex subject, I'll definitely would work a little slower, just make sure everything is in the right spot. But here it's part of the fun of this kind of a scene. Now, you'll notice I kind of divide every rock to generally three shapes. One shape is the kind of biggest one, which is either the shadow in this example here as well. And then I have this mid value, and then I'll have highlights, okay? This is what I aim for. Here we have shadow, highlight, and here we have shadow, highlight, and here we have a smaller shadow and a bigger highlight, maybe with a few details within it. We'll see, I'm not sure yet. But again, these are very forgiving shapes because it's just stones. And that's what's fun about this kind of a scene. You can let go, really enjoy it, and as long as you get it somewhat accurate, it will look good. Okay, let me see that you're seeing everything properly. Yeah, okay, that looks okay to me. Okay, we'll continue. Let me see the chat here. Yeah, it looks okay. Okay, if there's any issue, you let me know. I'll try to fix it. I don't like when I don't monitor what you guys see, but I want to make sure that I get the drawing right. Another rock. And the beautiful thing about this is you already, without even trying hard, get a nice little variety of shapes here. One rock is smaller, one rock is larger. It's a really nice kind of a subject to tackle in that regard. Try and get a lot of variety done. A lot of the beauty here is how these rocks cross through the horizon line, by the way. So make sure to not end them like tangentially to it. That's like the worst. Even for rocks that may seem like they end there, I'll extend them. I'll show you in a moment. So here's another one a little farther. Trying to avoid like similar shapes to multiple rocks as much as I can. Here's a thin one here that I'm considering moving to the right. Oh, let's leave it here. That looks nice. Thin one here. Casting a shadow. Casting a shadow. We have a small one here. So this one does end kind of in the horizon line. I'm going to extend it a bit over it. Okay? Kind of like that. Just looks better in my opinion. Here's another one at a bit of a distance, and I didn't leave enough room for the one on the right, which is fine. I'm just gonna not include it. I'll close the scene a little bit here, okay? I love this. This is a beautiful, beautiful composition, very varied and interesting. Let's put another one farther at the back, closer to this one, rather than this one. And if you have any questions about the drawing stage, drop them in the chat now, and I'll see them in just a moment. Here's another one. We're almost done. Another rock going. So it should go a little lower. Let's do it a little lower hanging. Kind of like this. And maybe one that's a little crooked, as you can see there, kind of to the leaning to the right, like this. Should have kept this a bit of a bigger distance, but that's fine. And I think that's good. We closed off the scene, probably due to my lack of planning, but that's fine. Usually that's how I'll approach things, even when I do plein air on the fly. I like to just get started from the center outwards. Sometimes whatever I don't include, it's fine. It still looks good. I will add this smaller one here. A little more at the distance, like that. And we'll make sure they all have cast shadows. There's a pretty major cast shadow here, kind of like this. Forgot about this rock, so let's put that in. This is going to cast a shadow. This is probably going to cast a shadow back here. This is going to cast a shadow. This one's going to cast a shadow. This one's going to cast a shadow. And we're done. We have everything we need. Okay? So let me go over the chat, make sure I didn't miss any questions relevant to what we're doing. Okay, very easy to understand. Thank you so much, Jan. Which is, in your opinion, the most dramatic? That's a good question. I think that's very subjective at the end of the day. To me, let's see. I would say number 3 is quite dramatic if you like that contrast in temperature. Or number 5, it has very dramatic shapes. All of these shadows coming towards us in a very sharp manner. I like that a lot. I think that's very dramatic. Should we try these practice at the same time today, or you suggest just sit back and enjoy whatever you feel like you learn best from? You can watch it and then rewatch and paint along with me. I personally find that when I do a paint along without watching first, I get a lot of things wrong, but that really doesn't matter. Whatever you prefer, really. Anayansi Bryson says, hi from Houston. Thank you for keeping the great content coming. Sensei, thank you so much. Pen says, yes, one would be awesome. Happy to hear. John says, hi, Liron, how would you paint reflected light within a shadowed area? It really depends on the light. You have to figure out what color the reflected light is. Usually it's way more subtle than people think. And the value, because the reflected light will obviously tend to, well, not tend, but will many times have different value. So is it lighter? Usually it will be lighter because it is light, reflected light. So yeah, it will be a lighter version of a different color. But if you just follow what you see and you really train your ability to match the value and match the color, you will do well without calling it a reflected light. I hope that makes sense. You don't have to even name it. You just follow, you render it like a robot in a way, and it will work. I hope that makes sense. Joan Johnson, hi Liron. Vojta Chepalak. I know I'm always mispronouncing. Sorry about that. Hi, Liron. Awesome. I made it. I'm following along. Thank you so much. Also, hi, everyone. What's the difference with this scene and that of a woodland? It really will depend. I think one big difference, if you compare it to a woodland, is the woods will have a more brown-red feeling to them, while these are more gray. So the main subject here is the stones, which are going to be grayer. In a woodland, you'll have more green of the leaves, but also brown and red of the tree trunks. So that'll be a big difference. But for the most part, very similar. In many ways, you have the long cast shadows, a lot of parallels, actually. The rock which is behind the centered and biggest one is not in the right perspective. It is fronter than the real. The rock which is behind the centered and biggest rock, which I guess is this one, is not in the right perspective. I don't know. I mean, it's barely visible. You just see a bit of its left side. I hope I'm understanding correctly. Let me know if I misunderstood. But even if you don't get it as accurate as possible, it's still pretty good because it's a very organic structure, very random. Are these kinds of things important? Again, for the most part, this kind of a scene, it's not like a building, so your eyes won't necessarily see it as wrong. What's more important in this scene is to get the values kind of right, as long as you got a very basic, good drawing in. More importantly, you'll have to make sure you get the nice highlights going, you'll get things like that. I think to me that will be more important. Rinske, hi, came in a little later, loved the drawing already. Oh yeah, cool, thank you so much. Oh, I'm happy you like it, and you can rewatch the first 15 minutes, or I actually think they're quite valuable. John says, thank you, Liron, makes sense. Hey, looking good on the paper, thank you, says Enrico, thank you so much. So here's where this is going to be a little different from previous processes. Now what we're going to do is actually paint the highlights first. So you can see here all of these highlights on the rocks. What I usually do, again, is cover the entire scene. This time, I'll just put in the wash for the rock. So let me put my palette here, make sure you can see everything properly. We'll move the reference here, make it a little smaller. We can afford to do that now. The paper is at a very gentle angle, maybe like a 10 degrees, 15 degrees, something like that. And we can go at it. I like this green already on my palette, but we won't need it for now. We'll actually need some yellow. So let me observe the reference photo here. These are very gentle, warm colors, very gentle. What you see in the, for example, here, it's just a very gray kind of yellow, but we do have the freedom to change it. So feel free to. I'm gonna, for now, start, and this is how I usually mix, and sorry that my chair is extra cranky today. What I usually like to do is first start with the color I'm most after, like this kind of a nice warm yellow, and then I can feed into it a few different colors to mute it. So maybe a bit of the blue and a bit of the red, just to mute it a bit. Now what we end up with right now is pretty green, so I will have to mix constantly until I get something I'm happy with. And by the way, you can exaggerate this step. You can go quite exaggerated, and also every stone is a little different. The colors on it are a little different. Honestly, this should be much more gray than what I'm showing you here. But I think I'll go for that. I like that yellow a lot, so let's go for that. Let's exaggerate the colors, feel free to. I'm gonna start with the central stone here. See, very yellow highlights. This may seem a little strange again if you're used to my usual approach, which is a little more cover everything up. In this example, we'll do it a little differently. And the reason I want to try it out that way is a lot of people complain that they're having a hard time figuring out what to skip, like the highlights, where they are and how to leave them paper white or the previous layer. So if you're doing it that way, you don't have to really work that hard in the next wash. You know where the highlights are. I hope that makes sense. Now I started with a pretty strong yellow, and I'm slowly muting it the more I move to the rocks on the side. Okay, adding a bit more of that blue here. I don't need to access the wells. I already had a bit of blue there, and I need just a little. So it actually works out great. Here's this one, even more muted, more towards the perhaps gray, kind of green yellow. And you'll see the colors aren't as important necessarily here. Once we get the values in the next stages, it's going to look really, really good. This one here is pretty much in the light, kind of like that. And the beautiful part is it's okay if you go over areas you shouldn't have, as long as it's not too egregious. If you just go a bit away, because we're going to paint over it with a darker layer. So you don't have to be that worried about that. This one here is really towards us, and it's way more subtle in its yellowness. It's kind of more gray, to be honest. So I'll keep it that way. Trying to make this a rather straightforward process that anyone can follow along. Could make this a lot more complex, to be honest with you, and really get some nuances here in the light and shadow. But let's keep it for now on the simpler side. This I'm going a little lighter on this stone here at the side because it's really light. We had this one that I didn't put in, that's fine. This one is pretty much in the light, this side. Here we have a sliver of light. Here we have a bit more light. Here we have a bit of it too, and on top as well. And we're pretty much done with putting in the highlights. Now, I could do this in one swing and merge it with the background, but I actually want to, in the next layer, start getting in some more, some of the actual more final colors. So we'll see about that. We'll see. But the idea here is to work around, for example, for instance, to start with the highlights and then take it from there. Let's let it dry for a few moments. Look at some of the questions you possibly ask. Pat Wentland. I love this. It's helpful for me as a beginner to watch how you approach the sketch. I'm feeling a little more brave, definitely. You get braver from one painting to another, for sure. That's something I really feel. And it is true for every painting. Even paintings you mess up, sometimes they'll make you even more brave. Sorry if you've seen my face all this time. I don't know why it was blocking the camera. I wasn't that close. Let me see what you see here. Okay, that's good. Not the end of the world. Luxman Das, thank you so much for this. Learning a lot already. Perfect. Happy to hear. Elsa Grace, what about the sky? When will you put that in? Okay, so let's talk about the next few stages. So we got the highlights in. The next stage is indeed to put the mid values, because I'm starting from light to dark. Now, what are the mid values? Where are they? The way I see it, the shadows are these. These are going to be the darker values, okay? I'm going to erase that, what I just did, because after I put paint, it's impossible to erase. But this, to me, is the shadows. The mid values, which are the darks. The mid values are actually the sky and the green here. And this is what we're going to get next. So here's my plan for the next wash, and we'll give it a few more minutes to dry. But generally speaking, I'm going to start with a fairly strong blue. And as I get to this point, I'm going to switch it over to a strong dark yellow ochre kind of color and slowly and gradually turn it into green. And this green is what we'll mix on paper as you've asked. So we'll do a lot of yellow and blue patches all over. It's going to look beautiful. And I'm going to use my other palette for this stage. Now, here's how this stage is going to work. What we're painting in this stage is everything that is mid-value. So we're going to paint everything that is not the shadows. So we're going to skip these shadows, you see? In the first wash, we allowed ourselves not to worry about what's the highlights. In this wash, we will have to worry about what's the shadows. Now, not necessarily. We can paint over the shadows. We can just go ahead and paint over everything. I will choose to avoid them so that I can get them in one wash. Okay, basically you'll see no glazing here. Glazing, aka painting one layer and then painting on top of that. We won't have almost any of that here. Why? Because for each stage we're just painting the current value we're working on. So highlights, mid values around the shadows, not over the shadows, around them, and then putting in the shadows. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It's a much more straightforward process. Some people may prefer it. Don't get too caught up on processes to the point where it becomes religion. Develop flexibility. Sometimes you'll feel like painting this way, sometimes you'll feel like painting that way. So right now, I feel like painting in this kind of a set stage from light to dark. Other times I'll feel like painting, covering everything up, letting things mix in the first wash, then painting over some areas. Okay, it really will depend on what you prefer at the moment. Some subjects are easier to approach this way, while others are the other way around, but still, you may feel like some days doing this, some days doing that. Okay, so don't block off the other options, is my point. Domo, hi Liron, I'm currently doing my second ever commission. Thank you so much for the free tutorials tips. I've learned so much from you. I'm so happy to hear. Commissions are amazing. You'll make some money. That's really cool. Even if it's for free, well, it's a commission, so it's not for free. But in any case, I'm so happy for you. Cilia infused in water. It's like air painting for us beginners. Air painting like plein air, or just air, a breath of fresh air. Andrew Lee, I'm late. I'm glad I made it before you got too far in. Good morning from Richmond, VA. Thank you so much for being here, Andrew. And be sure to check out the beginning. It is, I think, important. It's not necessary for you to see the process, but it will give you some extra insights. By the way, thank you so much to anyone who's watching right now. I see 108 viewers. I really appreciate it. And if you can, take a moment and drop a like on the video. It really helps it reach more people, even after the live stream is finished. I really appreciate it. A lot of the live streams have gone to get a lot of views, so that's really helpful. So thank you so much for that. Susan Lynn, good day, Liron, and everyone. Thank you so much, Susan. Have a great day, and thank you for joining us. So now, let's maybe give it just a quick hair drying session, just to make sure it's fully dry, and then I'll continue with the sky and ground. And you'll see exactly how I do it. I think it's going to be fairly straightforward. So just one sec. Now, this wash is going to be much more complex than the previous one, because in the previous one it's just small sections. Now we're going to paint a lot. So what we're going to do, and I aspire to have it done in one go and that I won't have to go over it. So a couple of preparations. First, I think I'll make the angle steeper to help the paint move more. For that, I'm going to need my trusty bigger tape roll. It's going to be an extreme angle, okay? You will see everything hopefully okay, but I do need this angle to have the paint move as much as I can. And I'm going to use a larger brush. All of these are preparations for a bigger wash. So you have to have everything, all factors work in your favor. And this is challenging for me too. Don't think just because I have some experience that I'm not having a hard time with these types of washes. So stack everything in your favor and have, let's move this one. I'm going to use the other palette for now, like this. And I'm going to put under it this paper towel so you can see the colors. So I can see them too, by the way, because you can't see them on the palette. So I also have trouble with these washes very frequently, so I have to make sure I have everything ready to go. Also got my water sprayer to pre-wet the wells and also keep things flowing in case I mess up. Okay, so I'm re-wetting this wash here. I'll need a lot of blue. Now, because the yellows are quite muted, I can go for a strong blue and keep the balance going. And that's the beautiful part about doing these scenes. Let's see here. So the blue is actually not that much darker than the yellow. The sky, obviously, if you look at the sky, it has a bunch of values. It actually starts stronger blue and then goes and gets a little lighter. So I don't worry too much about the values here. A lot of the beauty will come from the contrast in color. Okay? I do have to make sure I mix enough. But have that in mind, it's really important. A lot of the beauty here is going to come from the contrast in color rather than having a darker value for the sky. So I have to mix enough just to get that. And again, the reason I can go as blue and as strong here and not mute the sky blue at all is because my yellow is quite muted. So I'm going to have a nice balance of strong colors and more subtle colors. I think I have enough to get started. So let's do this. So I'm going to put a blue here. Hopefully we won't have any leaks. And we'll get started. What a beautiful wash. Now, I'm going to charge it with more blue because up top it's the strongest. And even maybe a bit more water along the way, because I want to make sure that I get a nice bead. See this? Paint moves downwards to using gravity. My steep angle helps a lot with that. And I'd much rather use this thick brush for this stage. My hands are a little shaky. I guess I'm excited or nervous or both. But yeah. I'm going to use this big brush. It's easier for me to fill in the areas a little faster with it and get an even transition here all along this first wash. But as I move down towards the details, I will probably switch to a bit of a smaller brush here as well. Keep things moving simultaneously, right and left. You have to keep things moving always. Now here it gets admittedly a little harder. So I'll switch to a smaller brush. No need to work super hard. Not proud to say that when I got started with watercolor, I would be so lazy I wouldn't switch to a smaller brush. And it will end up hurting the results. So now I do make sure to do that. Let's start here on this section. And you see how a lot of the contrast comes from the color and not necessarily the value. And I'm fine with that. I'm all for it. Okay, good. Finish this rock. Worst case, we can glaze another layer on top. I'd much rather avoid that and get a good impression right out the gate, okay? Well, I have to admit, it's one of those things where I would really prefer for it to look good on the first go. Sky looks good. I like that. It's a very different, it's kind of more similar to how Gary Tucker works. He really makes sure to start with the highlights and lights, really to work from light to dark. Unlike me, where I tend to go for a more unified process. So if you're a fan of his work, which is excellent, some of the best tutorials on YouTube, you'll hopefully enjoy this process. Now, I'm going to gradually transition to a bit of a warmer mix here. And in fact, I'm going to get rid of this palette for now. I'm going to use this one because I love the warm colors I have here. So we have a bit of that yellow we used earlier. Let's put it here. Switch it around. Now luckily I built enough bead so that I will still get an even transition. But I do have to work fast here. Okay. So I'm going to get started with kind of a muted yellow for that hill behind. And a lot of this blue is going to flow into it. So if you don't want as much flow, soak it back with a brush that's slightly dry. Like this, like this, like this. Just to get a very less movement. And I can also play around with the angle, lower the angle a bit. Though I think I do want to stick to the this angle for now. All the things I'm doing right now, you have to work fast, okay? So that looks good. You have to really start working fast at this stage. Let's get a bit of yellow ochre there. And hopefully that'll make sense for the hills at the back. And this stage is going to be a little, will require speed. But as I move down and the areas will merge together, it's going to get a little easier to get everything going right, okay? And this will still look like nothing. Don't worry if it still doesn't look like, you know, anything too great to you. And you can paint over the shadows, as I mentioned before. You don't have to, let's use a bit of spray. You don't have to paint around them. I choose to go for a more pure kind of light to dark process here. You don't have to, okay? Getting to move all the paint, and as I move down I'm going to start introducing a bit more blue, but this time it's a different blue, and let it mix on paper because I do want some flow. So far the process has been so fragmented. This part is blue, this part is yellow. Let's mix, let's get some of these beautiful mixes going here. I will probably have to go over the grassy area, make it a little darker later on, so just be prepared for that. Let's put a bit of this strong sap green here. See, like that. This is where you let things mix on paper freely. Don't worry if it still looks strange. I promise you it will improve later on. Put some water on it. Let's see. Now, I promised I'll show you the wetness. You see? So this lower section is wet, but the top is not. So you have to be careful. Anywhere above this line is no longer wet, no longer as reworkable. Okay? Be careful with that, because if you start working there, you'll get those dreadful cauliflowers, which we're not afraid of. Okay? Even if you get some cauliflowers, it's no biggie. But just be aware that they exist. Now, if you want to get some effects, you can just grab a bit of water in your hand and go like this. And it will feel like some kind of a texture that may serve us later on to create some interest. Try not hitting the sky like I have here, but for the most part, I think it looks good. I'm going to add a bit of a darker, maybe green in some spots if I can, even though for the most part this is dry. Kind of like this. Don't overdo it, just a few times. This is, for example, dry already. I shouldn't have gone this far, but that's fine. Not the end of the world. And we can do another round of just this bit of flicking water. I believe, I don't know if it was Joseph's Bookvich or Alvaro Castanet, but I've seen some people do that. And the best way to do it, by the way, is with your hand, rather than like sometimes I do this. That's okay, but it's not the best way to do it. Let's get rid of this. And remember, you still don't have a full context of this scene at all. Everything from the ground down should be darker, and the rocks should be darker. Okay, we will have to probably go do another wash over the ground here, which I hope not to have to do, but I think we will. Okay, so look at this as kind of an underpainting for the ground. We'll see how we can continue. I'll probably add a bit more red to the next wash, make it a little interesting, because right now we have blue, yellow, green, no red. I personally like to show all primary colors in my paintings, all three main ones. Okay. Let us see what you're writing in the chat. We'll address some of that, and then we'll continue, dry this, and continue. Okay, Handy Shade. Liron, do you have any tips for making lots of stock to sell? Do you mean paintings? Specifically for beginners with only a couple of paintings to sell. Yeah, paint a lot. And do some pieces in which you're really focused and deliberate and slow. That's the key. Paintings, I find that out of all the paintings I have, maybe 20% is something I'm very happy to sell, just because the quality is a little higher. And I find it's these paintings that keep me going. And it is true that the best paintings do sell more. So I would say at least spend 20% of your time working on a painting that is more careful, more deliberate. You devote more focus to it. Not necessarily larger even, not necessarily more detailed. It's more about the focus that you bring to the table. Try doing that. And that way you'll make sure that you have enough stock that you're proud to sell. I hope that answers your question. Selling is a whole different topic and something that takes a lot of work in and of itself. Elsa Grace, now that you named the values, I can see them. Awesome. Susan Lynn, hi Dave, hi. A lot of likes. Thank you everyone for being so nice to each other, and 130 people in the house. I really appreciate it. Zaid Thakur, can you show how you will go about creating an artificial light and shadow setting? Yes, I have a video on inventing light and shadow. You want to check it out? Just search for my name, Liron, and inventing light and shadow. You may enjoy it. But I can do another one on that. Susan Lynn sends a candle. Thank you. Pence Palacio, I could relate myself when using multiple palettes, just use a specific color. Yeah, I always work by color rather than by brand or anything, and they're spread out on multiple palettes. So yeah, and also pretty happy seeing you use Roman's small palette again. Definitely, I'm planning on using it a lot more in the future. Dave says, From last week's discussion on spray bottles, I got mine from Boot Store for 50 like cents. Amazing, it works like a treat. That's the best. I'm telling you, it's the best way. Sometimes the best materials are not in the art store, and they're way more expensive. Pick a design with simple components, create an assembly line, robotic-like. Do you really want to spend your time there? Elsa Grace, not necessarily. I don't know if that's what Hanny meant. And sometimes you get in the habit of doing that too, by the way, just out of habit. And then you kind of fall in and out of it. Pencil Liron, do you prefer a flowy watercolor or a still type one? I love flow. I love, like, if I could keep this one like that, I'd love it. I really like when a painting has a lot of places where you can tell this is watercolor. It's very clear. It's obvious. This is watercolor. I loved it. Even if some parts of the painting are more strict, rigid, and lack movement, I love to have at least one part that is with movement. And if you've seen my How to Simplify course on Udemy, which I got a lot of reviews for, and thank you so much for that. A lot of new students on Udemy, and also here on YouTube, people watching the videos. The last tutorial, you saw it's the shoes, it's the all-star shoes. Only the background has a kind of gradual transition. The shoes are fairly strong and strong contrasts. As long as you have one spot that is like that, that's good enough in many ways. So yeah, I like to have at least one section like this. The Apple says, hello, I'm new. Welcome aboard. The Apple. Drawing Tech Tamil, hello, I'm new. Oh, you're new too. So thank you so much to anyone who's new. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you can. I have a bunch of tutorials, shorter and more to the point ones too, not just live streams that tend to be a little slower. Elsa Grace, I love that bead that just sits there. I need to work on adding water and working fast with it. So fascinating and enlightening to watch. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear. Yeah, I have to work fast too. I have to push through the layers fast. I have to make sure I get things even. It's not necessarily something that changes with skill. You still have to sometimes work fast. Jack Cerrone, where can we go buy some of Liron's art? Thank you so much for asking. And you can actually just go to lirongallery.com and you have paintings of mine there. I'll drop a link. Liron. My keyboard's on Hebrew. Don't ask me why. lirongallery.com. If you want to check out paintings, do that after the live. I think YouTube hates, the algorithm hates when people click away from videos. So if you can do that afterwards, I'd really appreciate it. Elvira Raskov, nice work. Thank you. 456 Barrett, off topic. Are you interested in a black and white painting, and do you have a plan to make a live stream about it? Yes, I have done a few videos, not live streams, but I will do one. Yeah, a lot of people have asked for a monochromatic one. I think I have done one live stream that's monochromatic, but I don't remember. And it's not that off topic. It's really on topic. Barrett. Marjorie Johnson, I forgot all about sprinkling water with hand. I used to do that when I used to watercolor more than 50 years ago. Amazing that simple things can be forgotten. Yeah, for sure. Looking great so far, Liron. Thank you, Dave. Don't forget to like. Yes, thank you so much, Jan. Thank you to anyone who likes this. It helps more people find the live stream, and I really appreciate it. So we can move on with the process. Let me do this. I'm going to dry it so that it's completely flat. You see now it's very buckled and wavy. So I'm going to dry it fully with the hair dryer, and then we'll move on to the next wash, which is going to be darkening everything that's kind of in the horizon. Okay, we need it to be a little darker, and then adding those shadows. Okay, so let's do that. 1 second as I dry this. Okay, we're good to go. I do want to rearrange some stuff here for myself so that I see things clearly. Okay, so this is much flatter now. It's still a bit buckled, but not as badly as before. And here, if you want to see it in the front-facing camera, let me just show you here. This is what I've got so far. Let's get rid of all the stones. Okay, and we will move on. Now, I really do want this to be the last wash for the ground. Okay, it's really important for me to get it in fewer layers, fresh look. So we have to talk strategy. I'm gonna go over everything I did so far. I'm gonna introduce a bit of red just to make it a little more interesting. I'm gonna flick some water again to make sure that you see some of these beautiful effects. And I have to work fairly fast to get it to flow as evenly as possible. Okay, if you can't see, my line goes here, above, and back down. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm gonna use similar colors, so some of that yellow ochre will be a good way to start. I'll mix a bit more of it. And now here's something to have in mind. I am now working over an existing layer of paint. So the paper, and this is something I talked about in a previous live stream, the paper, when you get started, it's like this. It's locked together, the fibers. As you wet it, it gets untangled and it becomes, well, it becomes more tangled, like this. So the surface takes to water and paint a little worse. So everything that comes after the initial wash, you're gonna have to, and I told you there won't be any glazes, here I am, I was wrong. But everything that comes after the first wash over it will have reduced absorption, will work a little differently, okay? Just letting you know, because you will experience it a little differently too, and it may be scary and it will feel a little less flowy, and I get it. So it's natural that you'll feel like you're maybe struggling a bit more, having a bit of a harder time. Just saying so that you know. Here's the hill, and I don't mind that it's all a hard edge. It actually looks good to me. Normally I would be like, I'll make it varied, but I don't think it's necessary here. Now a bit of blue, getting things to be a little darker. So I'm going to use pretty much the same color scheme. Let's start from the left to make sure that we don't lose the flow here. Get more paint. Let this yellow flow through. Same here. I don't mind the movement here because I don't have the sky's blue to drop into the painting. It actually looks good. Now I don't want to go too dark here. It's also a concern. So make sure that you're being very careful with how much you push the value to be darker. I don't want it to be too dark. And as we move down, I'm going to start introducing a bit of red too. I just love this kind of or maybe orange, I don't know, but I love the way this looks. I know it may seem strong, maybe a bit out of place to some, but I love it. Now here I have to work faster than I speak, so you will have to forgive me for that. Not enough time to actually explain, not enough time to think for myself, even. Just have to get through this stage as fast as I can. Like that. That looks good. That's dark enough. Get a few of these effects going fast before it dries on us. Because the previous effects from the previous wash aren't going to be as visible underneath this one. And what you can do is grab a small brush and just put in a few of these imaginary grass blades. I've seen Zbukvich do this too. It just looks sometimes nice and it gives you something to imagine within the impressionistic realm of the scene. Going a little stronger down at the bottom. Let's get a bit more wetness up there, like that, and we're pretty much done with this wash. Now, it may seem too strong, or it may seem too weak, but we're still not seeing it in the full context. What's the full context? Once we add these shadows in. That's going to make things very clear. Shadows plus cast shadows, okay? Which are the dark values, essentially. Everything we're doing right now is kind of in a mid-value realm still, okay? And if you'll notice, some areas of the ground are even maybe too light, indeed, especially up top. That's fine. Don't worry about that. It's all going to fall in the right context once we put in those shadows. And yes, it's not going to be identical to the reference photo. We've taken a lot of artistic liberties here. So let's see what you're saying. And by the way, on that note, the next stage is going to be the one where we get to have more fun, because we'll paint smaller spaces and we can do a lot of nuances of light and shadow within them. So you will see it's going to be very fun. Denise Mongery Rogers. I'm new to watercolor, so find this fascinating. Thanks. Thank you so much, Denise. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. I have a lot of videos like this one. Our friend Ray is here. That is art, not... hey, does drying it with the dryer flatten out the paper a bit? Yes, it does. And I'll tell you even more than that. Drying with a hairdryer can be very helpful for something I haven't really mentioned before. Let's say the paper starts to dry unevenly, meaning you have these valleys and a part of it is wet while the surrounding dries. The hairdryer can really help to make sure to rid you of that, to dry everything a little faster and thus more evenly. What you want to be careful of is not go too close to the paper, because that can push the paint. It can push the wet onto a dry section. You don't want that to happen. So work from afar. The drier it gets, the more you can bring the hairdryer up close. Okay? I hope that makes sense. It's something I never talked about because it's so niche like hairdryer, but it is very important. I hope that makes sense. That's Susan Lynn, thank you. Have to go. Okay, be sure to tune in maybe later, watch the rest. And the beginning was very important, so I'm happy you were there for that. Ray says hi again. Peace sign. Thank you so much for being here, Ray. I really appreciate it. Kim Blunt, yay, just hopped on. I'll rewatch this later in entirety, but great to watch the live demo. Thank you so much, Kim. There was a good part in the beginning I recommend you watch, like 10 or 15 minutes. And yes, answered. Elsa Grace, going over the wash would make me so nervous. I'm happy to watch and learn. Yeah, mix enough. Go as fast as you can. You see, we're dealing with the same challenges, really. Nellie Margaret, looking very nice. Which watercolor brand are you using? These are Paul Rubens. These smaller palette for the previous washes is a Roman Zmal palette, which is also another really nice one. These are all great. A lot of brands are great. I go by the colors I like, not necessarily by the brand. Marjorie Johnson, I went from watercolor to oils and now back again. Any clues to mixing on paper, difference between oils and watercolor? Yeah, everything is just happens in a greater speed in watercolor. I know oils do mix a bit on paper. If you let them dry overnight, that's just going to happen in watercolor immediately, pretty much. My advice, honestly, for mixing on paper would be, one, on a more technical side, I like to break off the color I'm looking for. So, if I'm looking for a green, I'll use yellow and blue. If I'm looking for an orange, I'll use red and yellow, and so on. That's the more technical side. But two, the only way to really get a feel for it is to do it a lot, because it requires some speed as well. So I would practice, just like I did in a recent video, I would practice filling in areas with varying colors. The advantage is you can mix fairly quickly because you're just getting one paint and putting it on paper. Then you get to the next paint, put that on paper. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Difference between oils and watercolor. Yeah, it's just a matter of speed for the most part. You get used to, on a more intuitive level, the levels of wetness. If something starts, if you put wet next to dry paint, how they mix together. If you put wet next to wet. If you put semi-wet next to semi-wet. I have a video on that too. I think a really good one. On using colors next to one another. Not necessarily the color aspect of it, but how they mix and how they move. Dave says, my favorite stage when adding darks to make it pop. Yes, it's a really fun stage. Lex Mendes, can you share your brush size, the main large black brush? Yes, so is it this one? This is an Escoda size 16. This one, if you're referring to that, it's a Leonard size 6, the equivalent of size 14, if I'm not mistaken. I think I got this one in Paris. I can't find these types here locally, unfortunately. Elvira Raskov, what do you do to avoid the muddy colors when mixing so many colors at the same time? I'm not mixing many colors. I'm all very simple colors. You'll usually get the mud if you're mixing greens and oranges and purples and browns. If you're mixing primary colors, which is what I'm using for the most part, and let me go over the colors real fast with you. if that's the case, if you're mixing primary colors, they're way more forgiving in that regard. So let me show you what I am mixing here, in fact. What the colors are that I'm using mostly. I just don't want it to drip on paper, so here we go. Let's see that you can see me. Yeah. So I used this bit of strong Pyrrole Scarlet Red, very bit of it, not much. Mostly New Gamboge and Yellow Ochre, both yellows. This green, blue, which I forgot what it was, to be honest with you. It's kind of a French ultramarine blue. What else did I use? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. I used the French ultramarine and Roman Smalls palette. That's it. A bit of this green, yeah, ready-made green. So it's 5 colors maybe. That's it. I'm not using a lot of colors. That's the key. I'm using a few colors and primary. Primary colors are very forgiving when it comes to mixing. Vojta, my shadows are all over the place, but I'm having a great time. Cool, that's the most important part, really. You do another iteration, you improve. Pens Palacio core watercolors might be fun to play with. Those paints just want to move on their own. Yeah, I should check these out. Raoul Campbell, please leave some white edges on the rocks for highlights. So here's the thing, Raoul. I actually painted the highlights. They don't look like much yet, but once I'll put in the shadows, they will. Now, you may be correct. I may need to add some extra lighter highlights. I'll wing it. I'll have that in mind for sure. Kim Blunt, the rules confuse me at times. I always learned that colors become cooler in the distance. This feels so warm. It's lovely. Can you help explain this rule? Yeah, it doesn't exist. Rules of colors I find to be very loosey-goosey. I don't adhere to them too closely. At the end of the day, if you want to get a certain impression, you may need to follow a certain rule. If you really want to make sure that this piece of land is sent way to the background compared to this, yes, maybe going a little cooler here will be a good best practice. But it's not a must, and that's the key. You don't have to do it this way, okay? My advice is always to experiment and see what you like, what you enjoy. If you look at Joseph Zbukvich's works, it's all very gray. So it's all very muted. And then a few kind of highlights to pop. There is a nuance in the grays, but for the most part, it's just gray. So it really is, you can break all of these rules. Zaitakur, would you agree that Thomas Schaller's approach to watercolor is not at all traditional? I wouldn't say it's not at all traditional, but I will say it's very interesting. I actually really want to bring him on and interview him because his results are beautiful. It is different from many other artists, but I don't know what is traditional in a way, you know? I could see Sargent paintings in a similar way to Thomas Schaller, in a bit of a different work process. So it's hard to say, you know? I get what you're saying. He does work a lot in a bit of a different manner to a lot of other artists that can be kind of bunched up into having similar results or similar approaches. I do get that. Yara Rivera, hi, I'm from Puerto Rico. I always struggle with shadows and light, so thank you. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to paint the shadows soon, and hopefully it will clear more things for you. Marjorie Johnson, for anyone that loves Scarlet, Daniel Smith will no longer be making Anthraquinone Scarlet. This is a beautiful color, boohoo. I don't know why they stopped. They stopped with a bunch of colors. So go get it now if you can. Kim Blunt, thank you, so freeing to ignore rules. Yes, indeed. Handy Shay, anyone have any tips on avoiding paper tearing when removing masking tape fluid? So anyone, if you have any tips, share them, and I will show you how I do it a little more slowly so you can see. You have to do it a little carefully sometimes, okay? Now, I'm going to dry this, okay? I want to dry the paper fully. It's still a little buckled, which makes sense. I've been using quite a wet wash. See? See this? We will flatten it, and you asked if it flattens it quite well. So let me do that for just a moment and come back and continue. So I think this is pretty dry. I'd probably dry it a little more normally, but I don't want you to wait too long. And I think it's pretty. It's gotten a little flatter. It's still, there is a bit of that. Let me show you, but you see it's a little less, okay? This part is mostly flat. Usually the parts that will buckle are where you really made a big puddle, used very wet paint. Now, I think I can switch to this bit of a lower angle here. Maybe I'll do something in the middle, so I have another one of these thin ones. I'll just stack them like that. So that's kind of a nice in-between angle. And we'll put the shadows. Here's the thing though. This stage is where we'll discover if we did things right. We got most of the values in. Now all that's left is putting in those shadows. Once we put them in, it'll put everything in a more complete context. However, things may seem out of place still. Things may seem not as good. So we will make improvements as necessary. We may need to darken some spots, lighten some spots. And you know how I love experimenting in live streams. I don't care about ruining things. I always try to push it, see if I can improve it, even if it's a lot of last minute kind of changes. So we'll do that. But for now, let's get started with the first stone in the middle, the main one. And the shadow on it is undeniably blue. It's more towards the blue. Very muted, but blue. So we're going to get started. I'll mix something here. And as always, I love starting with the color that I want to be dominant and then adding other colors to it. Now, an important thing to have in mind. We're now working directly on the paper because this is an area I left untouched so far. So first, the absorption is going to be fun and great and it's going to work well, which is nice. But second, we have to go dark. Okay, not too dark, but we have to pay attention to the value because we don't layer now. We're not layering above an existing layer. We're actually establishing something for the first time. In addition to that, this wash is less flowy. So we need to work faster. That's what this stage is all about. And you see me constantly adding, changing, moving, just to make sure that it looks good. So I think we're good to go. Let's start filling it in with the shadow. Let me move the screen so that I can actually see the reference photo. Now again, this is not black. It's really important to note. The reason I have to leave a bit of a leeway here is that the shadow that it's casting is darker. And I need to make sure that I have more room for that darker value to go, okay? Worst case, I'll glaze over it. Added a bit more red to it, and now I'm going back to a bit of green. Like this. And for the cast shadow, near the bottom, I have to darken significantly. Let's get a bit of these other colors that are a little easier to get to be darker. Maybe even this blue here. I'm mixing a few kinds of blue, but that's fine because it's such a dark value that it's okay. And near the bottom, I'm touching it, you see? And adding that beautiful cast shadow. It moves somewhere around here, okay? And I can use this opportunity while things are still wet to inject here and there a few darker sections, but really you have to be careful at this stage. You have to use very thick paint to negate the slight wetness on paper. But I don't want to go overboard here, so let's kind of stop it here. Now it may seem too light, it may be too light. Let me see this in the full context. Yeah, okay. I think that looks good. What we'll do now is continue with the rock, the stone behind it. So we're going to need more blue. We'll continue the same way. And don't worry, we can always darken it more if we need to. Again, this may be too light. You have to really strike the right balance here. Here's the one behind it. Used a bit more cleaner blue for this one. I don't know why. I think it'll look good. Even though I do recognize a bit more redness in it than I actually used. That's a nice little rock. Going here like that. break off that rigid shape. And right near the bottom, start darkening it even more with this more aggressive blue, and add that kind of a cast shadow here. In just a moment, you'll see it flat, like that. Okay, and the cast shadow will go somewhere around here. My hand's really shaky, I guess I'm really excited. And maybe let's make this cast shadow longer, like this. So that's another one we got. Now let's work on this one perhaps. This one is nice. It's a smaller shape, so a bit of an easier time for us. This feels a little warmer, so here we go, a bit more yellow in there. And there's a bit of a shadow up top. I'm not going to render each and every detail, but I will try to get the gist of it in. And by the way, if we miss the value that's in between, we can always come back and put it there. So if you have a mid value you haven't put, next stage we can do that. Now this is a little too dark. Let me get just a bit more water in there. Like this. At least it feels a little too dark there. We have this big shape here. Kind of like this. Trying to keep the pattern random as I can. Some of the grass blades here are visible. And finally, some cast shadow. The cast shadows, by the way, you can go either way. You can go maybe a bit more green, a bit more blue. It's so dark, it's very hard to see the nuance, but I think that works in terms of like temperature. Okay, we'll continue adding these the more we go. Here's another one that's almost fully shadow. Barely any highlights, if at all. Like this. Then it gets a little lighter as it moves down and maybe a bit warmer. So I'm going to add a bit of this to the mix. But you see how these stones create a beauty in the shapes behind and in front of them. So we're actually showing this highlight using the stone behind it. So that's always a nice effect to have. Now, if you are trying to stick to the colors you see, the one thing I'll make sure to pay attention to is keep the shadow colors similar in a way. You can vary them, and it's actually recommended that you vary them to some extent, but also try and keep them somewhat close to one another, okay? So that they feel at least a part of the same family in a way. Let's put a bit more darkness to the right side here, like that, and put in that cast shadow, like this. Okay, this one is nice, that's a fun one. Actually, let's go a little purer on the blue. That's a very nice blue, very thin highlight there on the left. This has a shadow as well. Go a little lighter towards the bottom, because it appears to be a little lighter in some spots. And then we can go back to a bit of a stronger color. And you have to understand, with all experience I have, I still don't know exactly what the result's going to be like. So I'm in the same boat as you. I don't really know exactly what will work, what will end up not working as well. You just have to go for it. Just really have to go for it. And the cast shadow of this one. Maybe it's too long, but that's fine. No one will ask any questions about this. I think people won't second guess it. There's a bit of a, let's keep that for a moment later on. This one's fairly straightforward. See, I lost the highlight there. I can bring it back later with some opaque paint. Any highlight that is lost, I'll bring back later. A bit of this, now a bit of that. Rock. Sorry that I don't have a lot to say about this stage really, but I think I even increased the contrast in some spots. Sometimes you'll have a spot that you really like in a painting, and I really like this one so far. This is a little too light, you see? I fixed it later on. In other stones, we will fix it, don't worry. I'll get it a little darker afterwards. It's just the main one, so I don't want the glaze to be too obvious, but I will fix it. That is, here's another one. Now here I'm going with what I already have on the brush, because it's pretty close. Now let's start putting in some shadows here on this one. Let's use this opportunity to, I don't know, get some details in. And maybe just overall darken some spots, I guess. I guess it is inevitable. It's almost fully dry, so I can't afford to do what I'm doing right now. Only for that reason. If it wasn't dry, I'd be in trouble right now. And here as well, a bit of shadows. And I think that plops it into its place. Let's see what it looks like from afar on the monitor. Yeah, I think that makes sense. The ground now that I look at it, the ground should have been a little darker. Maybe I'll go at it again, if I have no choice. What I could have done is go a little lighter in this stage, and that would have negated this effect. Actually, let's try this. Let's go a little lighter on this one, even though it's fairly dark, and see if it feels better in the context of the ground. And if not, we can always darken it yet again. See, that's not dark enough for me, so I think that's Ruth. So I think we have no choice but to probably darken the ground yet again. My lack of experience, probably. Let's see what this looks like when it dries. It will tell us a lot. So I'm going to go over the rest of the stones here, and as I'll finish them, I'll start looking at some questions you may have. And again, this is a bit of a different process, working just purely from the highlights and onto the shadows, light to dark in a more pure sense of the word. So once you put this step in, yes, it does put some things into context, and you find out if you have some inaccuracies, and I'm fine with that. I'll try and fix them as I go along. So here should be a slightly light, but still darker section. See this? Here it goes again a little darker. Disconnects here. I think that works well. You can start rendering each and every small detail, but it's boring and I don't like it, so I'm really keeping these minimal for now. But if you want to tackle this a little more slowly, once in a while I'll do a video that's a little more detailed, but for the most part I like the overall impression rather than really showing every small detail. Oh, by the way, I have found a YouTube channel that's really good with a guy that paints very realistic, like photorealistic paintings, and while it's not my favorite style to paint in myself, there's a lot to learn from. I will link it either later today or in a different video. I think it's really an underrated channel. Someone who appears to have a lot of experience painting. And he shows the process of really painting a little slowly and more hyper-realistically. And again, even if that's not your style of choice, which I know it's not for many of my viewers, it still is very beneficial, I think. You can learn a lot from that. So almost done here. I just forgot to add this cast shadow. Like this. And it goes in that direction, hinting at the shape of the ground by the wavy kind of motion there. And to be honest with you, this is pretty much done for this stage, okay? I'm gonna let it dry, reply to some of your questions, and then we'll see if we even want to make changes, okay? But I really like the way it looks so far, so I'm happy with it. Let's see what you're saying. A bunch of questions. Kim Blunt says you are the watercolorist whisperer. Thank you so much. Vojta, I heat the tape with a hairdryer and it comes off like butter. Yeah, that's a great tip, actually. I should talk about that more. Just heating it kind of sets the glue free and makes it weaker, weakens the glue. Laura Merrifield, I don't know if it's experience making the difference, but now, but I have found it since I moved to using mostly single pigment colors. I don't get the muddy colors I used to. Yeah, that makes a difference too. It's something I should talk more about. It does make a difference, yes. So using better materials, especially paints, of course, in this example. Brian Norfleet, question: how much should you care for watercolor painting? Should you care? Sure. What do you mean? How much should you care for watercolor painting? Do you mean like preserving it? It's better not to put it in direct sunlight if you're storing. Put it behind the glass once you frame it, but other than that, it's pretty easy going. It's easy to store, smaller. Dave says the more expensive or decorator tape is best, I found. It's also wider. Interesting. I use a cheap hardware store tape and it works best for me. Marjorie Johnson, if the masking tape used is hard tack, put it on your jeans first before putting it on paper. I use that too sometimes, and using harsh watercolor paper with masking fluid, I haven't had a problem, not yet. Yeah, that's a great tip. Barrett also says, Hanny, if you remove it in a 45-degree angle, it won't hurt the paper. I find that to be somewhat true. Yeah, I will show you. Nuno Pinto, use a hairdryer to remove the tape. Marjorie Johnson, dryer on tape is a good tip. Roll Campbell, removing the masking tape in opposite direction of paper. Yeah, that's usually what I do. All the chat jumped on me. Got all the messages at once. Marjorie Johnson, no wonder I wind up layering, then layering again. My puddle is not dark enough. Yeah, you have to train your mind to see how dark it should be here. Usually you need more like darker paint than you think. Ray says, great to add that bit of green to the bottom of the rock for reflected color of grass on it. Yes, indeed. Daniel Oliveira, what colors to shadow? So for the shadow, I used French ultramarine, I used Pyrrole Scarlet, I used yellow ochre for the most part. These are the colors I used for the shadows, and a bit of Quinacridone Rose, kind of, not Quinacridone Rose, but rather PV19, I believe, or is it PV19? Like the what do you call it? Now I'll have to check. Let me check which one it was in particular. I have all of the names of the colors listed here. It goes like this. Yeah, violet. So it'll be PV19 violet or permanent violet, which is PV23. That was the one I was looking for. PV23. So that's the one mainly I use to darken some spots here. I use it more as kind of a color that's convenient to get dark, which is why I use it. Not necessarily because I like the color in particular. Watercolor is for the adventurous, Elsa, no doubt about that. Enrico, what are the light vertical lines in the bottom of the piece? These, yeah, I just put in some grass blades, so I just put in a few light touches of water onto drying paint. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I think it's good. It adds some texture to the bottom, makes it a little more interesting. And we're actually at a very interesting stage in the painting that I think it will be interesting to discuss. So in just a few moments, we'll finish with your comments and then we'll talk about it. Lady T, this painting is absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much. Kim Blunt, Enrico, Liron used a clean brush to wipe. Yes, exactly. Ray, ironically, the shadow in the photo of the distance appears darker than the foreground, when distance is supposed to make things appear lighter. Not everything follows the law. Yeah, that's true. That is true. There are a lot of different factors that go into it. Law of aerial perspective. Ray, exactly, yeah. Vojta, I made the shadow way too dark. Is there a way to fix it? Yeah, you can lift it. Let me show you here on this spare piece of paper. All you have to do is use the brush, use a bit of a wet brush. So I dip it in the water. See, it's a bit wet. And then I touch the paint, scrub it a bit. You see how it lightens up? Then I dry the brush, clean it and dry it, and lift. See? See the difference? And then to top it off, you can even use a paper towel to dab some of it out. The result will be uneven and it will hurt the flow a bit, so do it very carefully at your own peril, basically. But that's how you do it. Again, brush with some water, wet it, clean the brush and dry it, and lift by scrubbing. Just a bit, okay? And you can also use a paper towel. One thing I would note is I'm looking for, and I will get soon, a brush that's a little, has shorter hairs and a bit harder so that I can actually scrub out small details, like small highlights if I want to or stuff like that. I'll find a brush that can do that well. I have a few options actually. So yeah. Let's see here. Elvira Raskov. I like you don't go overboard with the details on the rocks and give the illusion of texture. Yeah, exactly. You don't need much to give the illusion of texture. Some variation in the color, some variation in the value, and just a few touches on the outlines of the shadows, and that's enough. Zaid Thakur, are you aware of the watercolor clock? Do you like to use it in your work? Yeah, just by name. Sometimes I'll say like the color is very wet, so it's T. I don't look at it as this mechanical thing, really, because instead of looking at different hours on the clock, I see the entire spectrum, and it's just from experience. The more you paint, the more you're able to see each and every nuance. So it's very wet, which is T, slightly wet, there's no real name for it, slightly drier, just slightly, there's no name for that. A little more dry, there's no name for that. A little more dry, call it coffee. A little more dry, a little more, call it milk. A little more, call it butter. There's so much in between that you learn just based on intuition because you paint a lot. So I wouldn't say I use the clock for the most part, maybe just to explain some things. But yeah, when I paint, it's more about the gradual spectrum rather than the set milk, butter, tea, and so on. But I love that idea. I mean, it's a great idea. It's great for teaching purposes too. John says, awesome live session, Liron. Thank you. Please check my email about package to you. Thank you so much. I will check it out. Yes, I remember. Sorry, I haven't replied to anyone lately, so sorry about the delays. It's been a few challenging 2 weeks mainly. Some personal stuff and being sick. Rose 2 Animations. Hey Liron, where do you buy your art materials? Some locally, some on Amazon. Right now it's mostly locally. A lot of people have sent me stuff over the last couple of years, and because I really use everything up, I haven't had to buy paint for a long time now, actually. I always have another palette or another thing to use, so I barely got to buy in the last, 6 months or so. When I need something specific, I'll buy it. We have 2 main art stores in Tel Aviv that are really good, and those are the ones I usually visit. Vojta A, it worked, thank you, perfect. Jan Lundgren, got to leave, blah, dentist, another great session, thank you. Yeah, well, good job on helping people with their teeth. Laura Merrifield, a bad day painting is better than a good day at the dentist. Yeah, luckily so far I haven't had too bad experiences at the dentist. For the most part, it's been quite amicable. Is that a word that fits it? I don't know. But yeah, at some point I'll have to get something that's annoying, and that's fine. So let's talk a bit about where we are in the painting process. If you look at the reference photo and you compare it to my painting, it's very obvious that the ground is darker in the reference photo. Here is where I have to really think about it. Do I want to glaze yet another wash over the ground, or do I leave it like that? A couple of arguments for and against. I really like the flow at the moment. I love this smooth transition from yellow to blue to green to red. I love that aspect, and I love to preserve that. I also like the larger contrast in a way with the shadows on the rocks. However, it does seem like some of the highlights could benefit, and not even just the highlights, but rather like this rock could benefit from a stronger contrast, meaning a darker ground. So it is this question of, do you like it this way and so keep it this way, or do you want to maybe move a little bit closer to the original reference photo? I think it's very subtle for me, but I tend to maybe want to darken it a little more, just to see where we can take it with maybe the ground right now feels a little too transparent to me. And I don't mean transparent in the watercolor sense. I mean in the sense of it's not solid enough. I want to make it more solid. The only way I see of doing that will be to darken it. But it's going to be tricky because now it's a third glaze. I think we will do it, and I think I'll show you a way of doing it that will make it a little easier. So before, we started from the top to bottom, and we worked between those cracks between the rocks and slowly moved down. Here, it was a bit harder to control the wash, so I had to work really fast. What happens is, if we flip it, we're going to have an easier time up top. And this is what I want to try now. So we'll do it, I think, one last time, glaze over it, make it darker, put it in the right context, make it slightly darker than the sky, at least for the lower section, and see how it goes, okay? Now let me do one last thing. I want to take the reference photo here and turn it black and white just for myself, see what it looks like, and feel free to do that on your end, at home, and let me compare it to my own. Yeah. That actually makes me not want to do it as much. Let's zoom out a bit, see what it looks like here. I'll go just a little bit darker. Again, I always tend to err on the side of let's try it out in the live streams. But I have to be careful. What I noticed is this area here is a little darker, while this area is not. So I have to be careful, okay? Let's see what you're saying in the chat, but I will go for it. Okay, not too much, that's good. I'll probably get all the messages, bam, in one go. That's how it happens recently. So, I'll flip it. We'll do one more wash for the road. Hope we don't mess things up. And I think it's gonna work. I'm gonna keep my colors fairly simple this time. It's just gonna be a bit of blue and a bit of yellow. And the same ones too, because I don't want to spend too much time mixing here. I want this to be as fresh of a wash as I can. Remember, we're painting yet another glaze. We want to keep things flowy and even as much as we can. And I actually think this stage will swallow up some of the strength of those lighter sections we put in, which is going to be actually good for us. So, mixing blue, maybe I'll add just a bit of yellow here, yellow ochre. And hopefully that'll work out. I need way more paint than this. Let's see here. So this is fairly light, which is good. Now as I move a little downwards, we'll use a bit more blue. Get it to be a little darker. I think I'll switch to a smaller brush. Will make it much easier. Because the larger brush contains so much more water, makes it a little... The piece of the paint just dropped, which could have been bad. Come on, this isn't the right time for all of these things to happen. But in any case, let's darken it a bit, work our way carefully while we're starting to lighten it up. And the most important part is to not scrub it too much on the existing shadows and details, okay? Now hopefully I didn't go too dark, and if I have, my bad. Let's see, let's flip it for a moment. That actually looks perfect. Wow, that looks really good. I'm so happy. Okay. Just need to make sure that I work fast right now. That actually looks just like I imagined it. And you can glaze light over dark. You just have to be quick about it, okay? And not scrub it too much. That's the main thing here. Now, we're gonna let this move downwards a bit, okay? So I'm not flipping yet. And we'll remove the hair probably once it's dry. Yeah, we'll let it dry like this. Hopefully it won't. I have to try now. Let's try with the pencil here. Let's do some surgery. Gotcha. Great. And I won't spray again because I think some of it is visible underneath. There's no need to do that again. What I do want to make sure is that I get a smooth edge here. So let's just make sure that happens here as well. And let me get the hairdryer real fast to make sure it dries evenly, and then we'll flip it. Just as a quick note, from afar. In the beginning, from afar, the more it dries, put it closer. Okay, are you ready? Let's flip it. That's good. That works really nicely. So this did a couple of really nice things. It closed the gap on the contrast between the shadows and the ground, which was good. The shadows shouldn't have been that dark compared to the ground. I actually like it much better now. It also made some of the highlights pop more, but I was also careful to stop somewhere around here and still keep this beautiful yellow area, which I really like. I like how it turned out. Could it have been lighter, or could it have been left lighter? Probably. I actually think this looks great. I like it a lot. So the result is really nice. Now the question is, do we want to add some more things to it, or are we happy with it? What I think I'll do is slowly and carefully add a few small details. I think Ruth came to visit. Here we go. It's a good timing, Ruth. Welcome aboard. Very good timing. Very good timing to have you here, Lord Ruth. Mm-hmm. What do you have to say to the world? That you hate me and you don't want to be on the live stream. I know. I know. Look at her. Did you see the painting? Look here. Ruth signed the painting too. You may leave. You may leave now. I know. There we go. Thank you, Ruth, for the daily cameo. I salute you. So yeah, we had our little entertainment here. So what I think I'll do is, what I was just going to say, I think I'll add small touches here and there where I see them. For example, here there's much more nuance in the shadow. So I think I'll start putting in some more gentle details. And we'll see how it goes, okay? Now, you may think right now that the cast shadows aren't dark enough. That really is a matter of personal preference in a way. To me, they look good and they work well in this existing contrast, but you can go over them once again and maybe get them that next step forward. But that's just the price you pay for darkening the ground. You darken the ground, now things fall into a bit of a different balance, okay? So let's see what you're saying real quick and then we'll continue. Everyone's happy to see Ruth, and she signed the painting with her paw, as I mentioned. People like the painting. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Elvira. Thank you, Laxman. Nice touch. Thank you. Marjorie Johnson, now to replay and paint along with you. Grocery delivery and ordering messed up by Thursday morning. Will be interesting. No worries, yeah. Paint at your own pace. Hey Ruth, everyone's happy to see Ruth. Okay, let's continue. Let's bring this to the final version. So I'm going to switch to a bit of a smaller brush here. This is a size 8 Escoda Perla. Perla brushes come out of the box, they're white, and then you paint with them once or twice, and they're never white again. That's just how it goes. You'll never see the clear color of the bristles after one session of painting. So for the most part, these are going to be gray details. So I'm mixing in this nice little gray here, a bit of blue, a bit of red, a bit of yellow. This is the Pyro Scarlet, yellow ochre, and the French ultramarine, or a bit of a different blue. I'm not sure if it's a cerulean or something like that. Let's add a bit of new gamboge here, a bit of red. And let's mix until it looks gray. This is fairly gray. I can work with that. And I'll just start putting in some more nuanced shapes here. At least the way I see them. And this will it'll bring another dimension to the painting, another aspect, hopefully of beauty to it. And as long as you don't really try hard to overwork it, you probably won't. So I'm working fairly small here on some smaller details. Not going to do a lot on a macro level. It's just going to be smaller touches. Let's add a bit more blue to it. Feels like it should be a little more blue on some of the other details here. This very mild details here. We have some more nuanced light and shadow here as well. Starting with the rocks that are a little closer to us, that makes the most sense. And then moving on to the ones more at the back that are just not as important, because you won't see all the details. And it actually makes more sense to keep them light. To keep them looser when it comes to the details, because it just improves the sense of depth in a way. This one here, bit of details there. Hopefully things start to fall into place. Very nuanced kind of thing here. Here I kind of missed the highlight because I painted over it. I could use opaque paint. I could not. You don't have to. I love this kind of a thing here. Bit of a touch there. This is way too strong. Let's get rid of that. And some of this highlight is way too strong. This is pretty much okay. Oh, top here, forgot to darken some sections up. Yeah, this should be darker, not as light. This should reach all the way almost to the edge. And let me see it on the monitor. Yeah, I think that looks a little better now. Now, one last touch, I think, which could be very fun. There's actually a bit of detail at the back here, like a fence, but I won't put that in. What I will put in is, you see some rocks here and there? Let's get those in with some of my favorite opaque white, Dijon Brilliant by PwC Shinhan. Hopefully you can see it well. I love those rocks. I don't know why. I love how they're placed there. So let's get a few of these in. Very gently. Ooh, see this? It really ripped. So I'll have to be a little careful. Maybe I'll just put this piece of paper over it permanently so that it doesn't spill out too much. And only the most visible rocks. The rest I don't care about. And also with them, I'll mix it with a bit of paint here so that it's not too strong. Okay. And you see there's one here. Put two already, maybe a rock here as well. Just a few. You see how it gives the ground a bit more texture? Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe one here, but make sure to make them smaller the farther you go. Okay. Another one here, another one here. You see, it just adds a bit more. It grounds the ground in a way, in the most real sense of the word. Turns it into ground. And This is a little too strong. Now it may dry much lighter than I wanted to because I mixed it with a bit of paint, an actual paint that's not opaque. So we'll have to follow that. But we do have one last step, and if I can actually find the cap of the tube, we will be able to get to that next step. Here we go. And that is to add the shadows to these rocks. Very subtle, but we will add them. So let me show you, and we're almost done here. I think this is as far as I really want to take this painting. I like it a lot. I think it turned out really nice. These I like because they're very gentle. If you don't have too much drawing experience, it's a very simple subject to draw. Very straightforward. You don't have to know how to draw people or stuff that's very complex. Still life is even more complex than this. This is just rocks. If you're having a hard time, don't take it to me saying that you're not good, but it's just a slightly more accessible subject, I think. A bit of this blue. So we'll just put some gentle shadows there. I do see them, so I want to put them. Because if you have a shape that's beveled outside, you have to balance it with some shadows underneath or next to it. See? Really makes them pop and look more three-dimensional. I just want to make sure that you see this up close. I know my camera is really bad at focusing. Forgive me for that. And I think we're done. Let me just sign this. By the way, I forgot to mention again, or maybe to put strong emphasis on, I dropped some of the lower section of the painting. There was more in the original reference photo you've seen earlier. So let's sign this one and see what you're saying. I actually like it a lot. Very simple and straightforward. Not necessarily easy, but yeah, these rocks are very organic. You have a lot of leeway in terms of the shapes you're using. That's a great beginner subject in my opinion. Could be a little complex because it is a scene and you do have to worry about composition and such. But for the most part, I think this is a good one. So let me sign this a bit darker. I want people to see. I may put this one in the online gallery, we'll see. So just know that as you've seen live, Ruth signed it too, with her paw. And if you want to get a painting signed by Ruth, that's your chance. Sometimes it's really hard to get the consistency right for just signing. But here we go. We're good. I'm going to show you also how I removed the tape in just a second. Let's see your comments. Sorry about the light. The light is really bad now. I don't know why. Yes. Saying this is a video reference for my college course, says Katharina Eliza. Thank you so much for that. Dave says, looks fantastic. Thanks, Liron. Marjorie Johnson, Liron videos are up there with teachers that have studied worldwide. We viewers are so lucky. Thank you so much. I'm so lucky that I can do this for a living, really. Thank you so much. Ray says, what kind of light opaque paint is that? Please, again, I'll show you because people always ask. This is June Brilliant. Let me show you in the front-facing camera because it's just a little better quality and you can take a screenshot. June Brilliant. PWC. The pigment. Let's see if I can find the exact pigment for you. Here we go. It's pigments. I don't know if you can see. Let me just read them to you. PO20, PY74, PW6. I hope that's helpful. So that's that. And by the way, if you want to see it in the front-facing camera, I like it a lot. I think it turned out well. This is, if I'd paint this just for myself without filming, it would have been much faster. Because it is a relatively fast one, but because I'm trying to narrate everything, this one should be under an hour if I just do it for myself. Pat Wentland, I'm so glad I found your channel. You were so brave to add that last blue wash and it looks perfect. Thank you so much. We always end up with me needing to add something at the end that's quite scary, so hopefully that encourages you. What brand was the June Brilliant? PWC, Shinhan again. Kim salutes Ruth. Elvira says, good demo, Liron, thank you. Darn Miss Ruth. Christine says, thanks for answering the light opaque paint question. Of course, Ray, that is art not... Now, let's dry this and remove the tape. Real fast, just to make sure it's as flat as it can be. 1 second. Now, one more thing I want to do before I remove the tape. I'm going to snap a picture of it because I always tell you it's hard to see it for what it truly is in the video. I want you to see a cleaner, more, just a clearer version of it with the colors and everything, because I think it looks really good. So let me just snap a few pics here. Move it a bit. I'll send them over to my Mac. I want you to see what it looks like actually clean, clear colors. 1 second. Let's see which one looks best, the clearest. Yeah, that's good. Okay, yeah, that's a good picture. So 1 second, I'm going to rotate it if you really want to see what the end result looks like, because the camera is not doing it justice at all, as always. So I'm going to send it over to the Mac. Oh, that was a loud noise. And I'll bring it over. Plus image. And you may want to see final result. You may want to... make sure you don't miss that. Downloads. Story takes a moment. It's just something I have to do live on the spot. So yeah, it's a huge photo, obviously, compared to my screen size. But here you get to see, I think, more of the nuances. I haven't even edited it. See? Okay, I hope that looks better. Let me try editing it for a moment, because it's still not exactly as close to the reality as it should be. So let's see here. Adjustments, exposure. Okay. Yeah, the light is not that good, unfortunately. No, that's actually pretty close. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. It's actually quite close. It's just that the light now is not natural, so hopefully it still looks good on your end. Not as good as it looks like on my end, but still that's something. And here's once again the finished one. Let me show you with the face camera. So I think it looks pretty good. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and now let's remove the tape. So let's do this. Let's make this smaller. And the way I remove the tape, first off, you saw here, drying it with a hairdryer already started removing it, as quite a lot of people have commented. So thank you for helping each other. And the way I remove it, I don't go like up, I go like this. To me, that's the best way to remove it without ruining anything. And I can go fast too. I just like the effect of doing it slowly, but I can go fast, probably nothing will happen. Now, here is where you have to be careful. Just this first section. Once you're past that, you're good to go. Okay, we had a bit of a leak here. That's fine. And this red touch here is really was really important. I should have probably added more. Could have added more to these shadows, but that's fine. You see, I'm going like this, not like that. This, and we got everything out. Let me show you once again. Very simple. Honestly, it's slightly embarrassing that it took me 2 hours, but not that, speed should be what you aim for, but this one would have taken much less if I would just paint it without talking and explaining. I actually really like this one here. but also this one here. I like a lot of these. So yeah, and here it is again. And here it is again in the photo, just showing the details and nuances a little better, even though the colors are a little skewed, so my apologies about that. And now let's address some of the kind of closing questions, and we can close the live stream off. So let's see. Brilliant, Ruth. Laurie Hilbert, no worries, you missed the live, you can rewatch it, I'll keep it up. And I think the first 15 minutes are very valuable, so be sure to check these out where I compare the different reference photos. Arthur Koopmans, me too, just in time to see sign the painting. Sorry about that. That is art, not these small rocks in the foreground make a big difference. Yes, a great addition to add some more detail to the overall. But and I agree, it was important for me to put them in. Always make sure to notice how it's not. And sorry, you can't see it because of the picture. Just one more thing. It's not. Sorry, that's the wrong one. It's not the small rocks that make the thing work as a whole. It's the big shapes of the sky, ground, and all of these. The rest is really kind of small decorations. So that's really important. They're great. These decorations are very important in their own way. But what really makes this work is the large shapes. And then on top of that, if you layer a few decorations, it will make it much more, much prettier. Let's see. Pam Lake says, wow, it looks, I think it looks great. Thank you so much. Vojta, I love the result you run, and I had a great time painting along. Thank you for the stream. Thank you for being here. So weird. Ray says, how just one small difference can make a big difference. Yeah, that's true. I appreciate the different camera angles. Thank you, Donna. Don Dave Esquadro. I'm happy to provide these. Laxman Das, wow, the color nuance in the photo is easier to see. Thanks so much for this live stream. Had a really good time. Thank you. Really cool painting. Thanks for streaming this. Kim Blunt, wow, the detail adds so much. Great job on the work and the teaching. One of my favorite watercolor teachers on YouTube. Thank you so much. Marjorie says, next week then. Take care. Happy painting. Awesome result, Liron. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Now, if you're still here, be sure to like the video. It helps more people find it. I really do appreciate it. If you want to learn how to let go and enjoy the painting process and just paint loosely whenever you want to, be sure to check out the frustration-free watercolor course. The link, as always, in the description box below. That's the paid course. Now, the free course is the How to Simplify, which I highly recommend you check out on Udemy. Or here on YouTube, tune into the weekly episodes every Saturday. I really show you how to simplify your paintings, and we'll soon get to more advanced demos. I think you're going to really like it. It's been a few technical videos, but soon there's going to be a much more like just painting and a demo kind of video. And again, the frustration-free watercolor course, if you're struggling with letting go and really painting the entire picture rather than worrying about the small details, that's the one you want to check out. I really do appreciate anyone who gets my courses, anyone who gets my books, anyone who watches the videos, anyone who tunes in to the podcast whenever I post one. I know I didn't post enough content lately. It's just been 2 busy weeks. I will gradually go back to doing more, but I need my time a bit now, so just to take care of some personal stuff, take care of the health, sleep enough. So I'm really grateful for your understanding of that. Thank you so much. I will see you again in the next video on Saturday, and also, which is going to be a new episode of How to Simplify course, and also in the next live stream soon. I hope you have an amazing rest of the week or weekend. And yeah, I really do appreciate you being here. I'm very grateful to have you here. Here's just a final view of all the reference photos. Again, look at 6. 6 would have been really hard. But in any case, if you missed the first 15 minutes or so, go back, watch it. I think it's really useful, and I will talk to you again real soon.